You know, we get out of life what we put into it. In our modern, high-tech, computer-generated, consumeristic culture, everything's about getting things done easier, labour-saving devices, faster, internet, more leisure hours. Well, that was the slogan like 35 years ago when I was in the workforce. I was working in the printing industry, and the slogan was they were after a 35-hour week, and it was more leisure hours. Well, statistics tell us that full-time workers actually work more than 35 hours a week. Now it's probably more like 50. But the reality of life is our culture is trying to wire us actually to having things easier. Fast food, you go in there with less than a minute you get your burger. The reality of life is, though, that things of quality don't actually come quick, they don't come cheap, and they don't come easy. You know, in the 21st century, man's used to fast cars and high-speed transport and all that kind of stuff. In the old days, man used to walk, he used to ride horses, he used to get up early and milk the cows and what have you. And so it's only in recent times that we've got so lazy, isn't it? And we'd rather ride than walk. But the reality is these bodies were designed actually for some measure of exercise, for some measure of fitness, for some measure of activity. And so, on a practical front, getting back into some kind of exercise, like I am this morning, panting, going slightly uphill, getting back into some kind of exercise is actually good for us. But the initial burst, the initial adjustment back into fitness again is always a difficult thing, and it gets worse before it gets better, but that's only initially. But you know, spiritually, it's like that. The scripture tells us that bodily exercise, bodily discipline is of some value, but that spiritual discipline is of eternal value. It's of value both for this life and the life to come. And maybe you're out of spiritual exercise, you're spiritually unfit, physically unfit and spiritually unfit, or maybe you're physically fit but not spiritually fit. Well, you know, the Bible's prioritizing. It's saying that physical exercising is good, it's good for you. I'm doing some right now, and it's enjoyable because I do it every day, and it's good for you. A bit hard when you're speaking, but it's good for you. But that spiritual exercise is actually better. No, have a balance, have both for sure, but spiritual exercise is, spiritual discipline is of value for this life and the life to come. So I think a bit of both would be good, but a bit more emphasis on the spiritual discipline. In fact, if you read in scripture, and it's another story, but I believe there's a measure of healing that comes with that kind of discipline. You know, when you physically discipline yourself, there is a physical healing that comes to your body. Once you break through the barrier of the flesh and not being used to it, there is a healing that comes. You know, you get healthier. When I started training to walk the Camino through Spain, and it was 800-kilometer walk for me. When I started training for that, the first 3 or 4 months, first couple of months, I got worse, man. I got so sick, I thought I could never do this. But as I learned to temper it, build up to it slowly rather than jump into 17, 18 kilometers a day, start with 6 or 7, as I built up to it, I got healed. My body got well. By the time I got to Spain, about 6 or 7 months into my training, I started to increase in strength even more. It was difficult for the first 2 or 3 weeks, but then by the 6th week, it was a walk in the forest. Not quite, but it was like that sometimes. My feet hardened, my body got fit. Here we go. But after a while, you know, my body started to harden to the physical discomfort. I wasn't feeling the pain that I used to feel in the early days. And sometimes I reckon it takes about 6 weeks, don't they, to adjust to a new habit. And spiritually, I don't think it'll take that long, but maybe you need to start setting some disciplines for your life spiritually. start to read the scripture again. If you're not used to it, start small. Start with 15 minutes a day, perhaps, on the bus, train, or in your private devotions at home. Some people listen to Bible tapes. I think there's nothing better than actually reading it and listening to it, but doing it where you're not distracted, where you're concentrating. But start to develop some spiritual disciplines in your life. It might take a little while, but you'll start to find yourself gaining new strength. It'll get easier. And you know what? You begin to enjoy it. And for me, I enjoy what I'm doing today. I enjoy my walk, and before I did this walk I spent about 30-40 minutes just meditating on the scripture, which is what has inspired this little journal, this little video blog this morning. So bodily exercise is of some value, but spiritual exercise is of value not only for this life but the life to come.